Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are doing something. Well, honestly, it feels a little bit radical.
It's a big one.
It is. We're taking a document that is, it's arguably one of the most famous texts in human history. It's only 7 sentences long.
And yet over 1 billion people recite it every single day.
Every single day. Usually, they're whispering it in a hospital waiting room for comfort, or chanting it during a funeral, or murmuring it before they start their car engine.
It's the default setting for the Muslim world.
Yeah.
Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening.
Exactly. But today we are doing something that might feel a little uncomfortable for some listeners, or at least very different. We are taking that text and we are stripping away the incense. We are stripping away the chanting, the rosary beads, and centuries of ritualistic overlay. We aren't looking at it as a prayer. We are putting it under the microscope as a political constitution.
A manifesto of governance. That is the phrase the sources we're analyzing keep coming back to again and again.
Right, a manifesto. Imagine a document not meant to be whispered in a temple to get a blessing, but analyzed as the operational blueprint for a new world order, a constitution for a state.
And that is a massive paradigm shift, because usually when people think of this text, they think of religion. In Urdu or Persian, they'd say mazhab.
Mazhab.
But our sources for this deep dive are very, very specific. They argue that this text isn't about mazhab at all. It lays out a deen.
And we absolutely need to define that right up front. Deen versus mazhab. Because if we don't get this distinction, I feel like the rest of the hour is going to sound like gibberish.
It is the absolute crux of the entire argument. The sources argue that mazhab, which we typically translate as religion, is actually a later fabrication, or at the very least a deviation from the original intent.
A deviation how?
Well, mazhab implies private rituals. It implies a separation of church and state. It's the idea that, what you do in your temple on a Sunday or a Friday is your business, and how you run the economy is the state's business.
Yeah.
They're separate spheres.
And it focuses heavily on the afterlife.
Very heavily. The sources say it focuses on the afterlife to sort of sedate the masses.
Ah, the opium effect. The old Karl Marx line. Keep your head down, suffer in silence, and you'll get pie in the sky when you die.
Precisely. It keeps the status quo intact. It doesn't challenge power structures. Whereas Deen is presented as a collective code of life. It's a socio-political and economic system.
So it covers everything.
Everything. Statecraft, the law of requital, civil law, societal evolution. So the mission of this deep dive, really, is to generate a systems-level analysis of these 7 verses. We're looking for the operational mechanics described in the text.
And just a quick recap for anyone who might have missed our last deep dive in that session. We established the constitutional framework of the Quran as what the sources call a closed system.
Right. A closed, self-explanatory system. We established that the source material views the Quran as a document designed for the collective evolution of humanity, and that it explains itself. It doesn't need external history or tradition to unlock its core message.
It's its own lexicon.
Exactly. So today, we're applying that closed system logic to the very first chapter.
And a quick disclaimer before we jump in. We are, as always, impartial observers here. We're just reporting on the analysis provided in these specific grounded sources. We aren't taking sides, we aren't preaching, and we certainly aren't telling you what to believe.
Not at all. We are analyzing the mechanics of the arguments presented. We're looking at conditions and outcomes, the inputs and the outputs of the system being described, purely analytical.
Okay, let's unpack this. Verse 1. It starts with that phrase we mentioned, probably one of the most spoken phrases on earth. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim.
Usually translated, as you said, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful.
Right. But our sources say, stop right there. That's too passive. That sounds like a grace you say before dinner.
It is too passive. If you look at this as a manifesto, in the name of isn't just a label or a superstition. The Arabic word ism, or name, implies the attributes, the reputation, and the character of the sovereign.
Okay, I think I need an analogy here.
Think about it in a secular context. When a police officer kicks down a door and screams, "Open up in the name of the law," what are they doing?
They're not just saying a word. They're invoking an authority. The whole system.
Exactly. They are invoking the operational intent and the entire weight of the legal system behind them. They are saying, I am acting as an agent of this system, and my actions are in service of its goals.
Okay, so applying that here. Starting a manifesto in the name of Allah it's a statement of strategic intent.
That's the perfect phrase for it. It
Yeah.
means we are initiating this system, this government, this way of life to realize the specific attributes that follow. It's a commitment.
So starting an action or a state in the name of Allah means dedicating that action to a very specific, defined goal.
A very specific goal. It's a mission statement. The sources argue that when a person or a state begins with Bismillah, they're committing to operationalize the specific attributes mentioned right after.
Yeah.
Rahman and Rahim. We'll get to those. But they're essentially saying, I am acting to realize the system of universal nourishment and evolution.
It's not a magic spell to make sure you don't choke on your food.
No. It's a binding contract of intent. It's the preamble that sets the entire operational objective.
And that leads us directly into verse 2, which I guess defines the operational environment. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin.
Praise be to God, Lord of the worlds. That's the standard translation we all know.
But our sources have a pretty significant bone to pick with that word praise.
They do. A big one. They distinguish hamd from simple praise. Think about praise in English. It can be flattery. You can praise a tyrant because you're scared he'll throw you in jail.
Or you can praise a terrible painting just to be polite to the artist. It's subjective.
Exactly. It can be insincere. It can be motivated by fear or favor. But hamd, as it's defined in these sources, is the spontaneous, objective appreciation of a masterpiece that is functioning correctly.
Functioning correctly. That's an engineering term.
It is. Think of a complex machine, like a high-end Swiss watch, or something organic, like a thriving coral reef. When you see it working perfectly, every gear turning in sync, every biological niche filled, the output matching the input flawlessly, that feeling of awe and objective appreciation you get.
Right. It just works.
That is hamd. It is the result of observing a flawless system in action. You can't help but appreciate it.
So alhamdulillahi means something more like the appreciation of the perfect system belongs to Allah because he designed the system.
Correct. It's an acknowledgement of design perfection.
Right.
And why does the system work? The verse tells you immediately. Because of the core attribute mentioned next, Rab.
Rab, okay. Usually translated as Lord. But in this deep dive, we're obviously getting a much more technical definition.
This is probably the most important definition in this entire discussion. If you get Rab wrong, you get the whole system wrong. The sources tell us that Rab is not just a master or a king sitting on a throne. That's a static image. Rab is the sustainer of evolution.
The sustainer of evolution. That is a dense phrase. Break that down for us.
Okay, so the linguistic root implies a force that nourishes a thing from its point of origin, from its absolute rawest state, and moves it step by step through all its necessary stages of development until it reaches its final completion, its full potential.
Its full potential. And that endpoint has a name.
Yes. That point of completion is called takmil. So the process of rububiyat, which is the action of the Rab, is taking something from zero to takmil.
So it's a process. It's active. It's not just owning the thing. It's actively growing the thing.
Precisely. It's the process itself. It applies to a seed becoming a towering tree. It applies to a cloud of interstellar gas becoming a star. And crucially for our discussion, it applies to a human being developing their personality and a society developing its civilization.
So if God is the Rab, then the God of the system is literally the force that drives evolution.
Yes. And here is where the Manifesto of Governance comes roaring back in. If the ultimate authority is the Rab, the sustainer of evolution, then the Deen, the political system established in his name, must also be a system of rububiyat. It has no other choice.
I see exactly where you're going with this. The state isn't there to just police people or collect taxes. The state's primary mandate, its entire raison d'etre, is to provide the infrastructure for development, for evolution.
Precisely. The state, in this model, takes on the responsibility of the Rab on earth. It must ensure that every single individual, from the cradle to the grave, has the resources and opportunities they need to develop their latent potential.
Wow.
Think about it. If a seed doesn't get water and sunlight, it dies. Its potential is wasted. If a human doesn't get education, healthcare, and economic opportunity, their potential dies. The state, according to this manifesto, exists to prevent that death of potential.
And the scope of this mandate. The verse says, Rabbil Alamin.
Al-Alamin, yes. It's often translated as worlds, which sounds a bit cosmic and vague. But in this political and social context, the sources emphasize nations, or all peoples. This is the universal mandate.
So it absolutely can't be tribal.
It cannot be tribal. It cannot be nationalistic in the narrow modern sense. It cannot be a Jewish God or an Arab God or a Western God who only cares about his own people. The system described here must be a system of universal nourishment.
That is a massive political claim. I mean, that is a direct challenge to the entire nation-state model as we know it.
It is. It implies that if a state ensures the well-being and development of its own citizens, but then exploits or ignores the suffering of people in other nations, it is in direct violation of the principle of Rabbil Alamin.
Because the Rab is the sustainer of all peoples.
All of them. The system must ensure that no one, regardless of class, creed, geography, or race, is deprived of the means of development.
And if a state doesn't do that, according to this very specific definition,
Then it is not practicing the deen. It might be practicing a religion, a mazhab. It might have beautiful rituals and massive temples, but it is violating the core attribute of the sovereign it claims to represent. It is failing at the fundamental job of rububiyat.
okay, so we've established the goal, universal evolution. The what? Now, how does that actually happen? What are the mechanics? That brings us right to verse 3, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim.
And again, we usually hear the most gracious, the most merciful. These are emotional terms. They make it sound like a king who decides to be nice today and maybe not tomorrow.
Right, it's arbitrary, whimsical.
But our sources say, no, look at the linguistic roots. These are not emotional states. These are technical terms describing how the evolution of the rububiyat functions. They are two distinct modes of provision.
Two modes. Okay, let's start with the second one first, Al-Rahim.
Al-Rahim refers to provision and nourishment that is gradual, continuous, and systematic. It's what we could call linear evolution.
Linear, like
Yeah.
working for a paycheck. You put in the hours, you get the money.
Exactly. Or a farmer tending a crop. You plant the seed, you water it, you weed the field, the sun shines, the established laws of photosynthesis apply, and over time, predictably, the plant grows. It's cause and effect.
So it's the result of effort?
The result of effort within a just system.
Yeah.
In terms of statecraft, this is the infrastructure of society. A state modeled on this must provide consistent, earned development. If you work, you get the result. It's the law of returns.
So Rahim is the system that rewards effort. It's the economy, it's education, it's the legal framework.
It is the stable, predictable economic infrastructure that allows for growth through labor and contribution. But what if you can't work? What if you're born with nothing? What if you have no seeds to plant in the first place?
That's where the other term has to come in, Al-Rahman.
That's where Al-Rahman comes in. It's the counterpart. It refers to what the sources call emergent evolution, provisions that are sudden, explosive, or gratuitous. It implies getting something without putting in the labor for it, something that leaps over the intermediate stages.
Give me an example of that. What's a Rahmanic provision?
Well, the ultimate example given is the creation of life itself from non-living matter. That's a Rahmanic leap. Or, in the context of this text, the gift of revelation, Wahi. Humanity didn't earn the Quran through labor. It was given as a jumpstart to our collective intellect.
Okay, and on a more human societal level.
Think of a child born into the world. The milk in the mother's breast is Rahman. The child didn't work for it, didn't fill out a form. It was provided freely, gratuitously, to ensure its survival so it could begin the journey of growth.
So applying this to the state, to the Manifesto of Governance, what does a Rahman state look like in practice?
It means the system must provide those jumpstart resources. It means a robust social safety net. It means looking after those who cannot work, the elderly, the disabled, the very young. It means providing the initial capital, the land, or the education that allows people to enter the cycle of Rahim, the cycle of earned growth.
That is a fascinating and crucial distinction. You need Rahman, the safety net, the free provision, to even get onto the ladder of Rahim, which is the linear growth.
Exactly. You can't expect a starving man to pull himself up by his bootstraps, which is a Rahim concept, if he doesn't have boots. Rahman gives him the boots. Rahim is the path he walks with them.
And a just system has to have both.
A just system, Deen, must operationalize both. The sources are clear on this. If you only have Rahman, you create a society of dependency and stagnation. If you only have Rahim, you create a ruthless, cutthroat meritocracy where the weak are inevitably crushed. The Deen balances them perfectly.
It's a complete economic model in one verse.
It is. And that model is governed by the ultimate authority, which brings us to verse 4. And this is where the political theory gets really, really explicit. Maliki Yawmiddin.
Master of the Day of Judgment, that's the Sunday school translation. The one that, comes with fire and brimstone.
It does. But let's deconstruct it based on the sources, piece by piece.
Okay, start with Malik.
Malik means sovereign, owner, or king. It implies absolute authority over all resources. But the sources provide a really cool linguistic nuance here. They connect the root of Malik to the concept of a cementing force.
A cementing force, like glue. Or mortar in a brick wall.
Exactly like mortar. Think of a brick wall. The individual bricks are, say, individuals or nations or planets. What holds them all together into a cohesive functional unit, a society or a universe, instead of just a meaningless pile of rubble?
And the mortar, the binding agent, the malak.
Right. The sovereign authority is the force that integrates separate individuals into a single functional social organism. Without this central authority, without this cementing force, society disintegrates into chaos. It just falls apart.
So Malak isn't just a guy on a throne with a crown. It's the cohesive principle of the universe.
Yes. And in the human state, the law, the Constitution, acts as this Malak. It binds the society. If the law breaks down, the society crumbles. Now look at the next word, yom.
Yom, which usually means day, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
But in the Quranic lexicon, as the sources point out, yom almost always refers to a period, an era, or an epoch, like when we say the day of the dinosaur or the industrial age. It's not a 24-hour cycle.
Okay, so Yom Adin isn't just one terrifying Friday at the end of time.
No, it refers to the era of the system, or the period where the law of requital is in full effect.
The law of requital. And we need to define deen again here. We touched on it in the intro, but verse 4 is where it explicitly appears in the text.
This is the core contrast. We have to keep coming back to it. Deen versus mazhab. Mazhab, religion, is private. It's between you and your God. It's rituals. It often accepts a secular state for public affairs and keeps God locked away in the temple.
It compartmentalizes life.
Perfectly put.
Mm.
It compartmentalizes. Deen, on the other hand, is a collective code of life. It encompasses statecraft, economics, and most importantly, this concept, the law of requital. Makafadiemo.
The law of requital. It sounds like physics. Action and reaction.
It is exactly like physics applied to sociology and morality. The law of requital states that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, not in some mystical, karmic sense that might take lifetimes to unfold, but in a mechanical, predictable sense.
So God doesn't act on whims.
Never. God doesn't punish you because he's angry in an emotional human sense. Outcomes are the mathematical result of actions. If you put your hand in a fire, you get burned. Not because the fire hates you, but because that is the immutable law of the fire.
So putting it all together, Maliki Yom Ad-Din means
The sovereign authority over the era of the system of consequences. It means we are acknowledging that we live in a universe and should strive to live in a state governed by the inviolable law of cause and effect.
and the implication for governance is huge.
It's massive. You cannot practice deen in isolation. You can pray alone in your room, that's mazhab, but you cannot run a system of retribution and universal nourishment by yourself. It requires a sovereign state. The sources use the term tamkeen ad-din.
Power of the system.
Exactly, the establishment of this system. They argue that without a territory and a state to implement and enforce these laws, deen is just a beautiful theory. It's just religion.
That is a powerful and frankly very political distinction. It moves faith from the private sphere directly into the public square. It demands a government.
And that very transition from acknowledging the authority to actively interacting with it happens in the very next verse.
Oh.
Verse 5, Yaka nabudu wa yaka nastin.
You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. Again, the standard translation.
Stop. The sources say, delete the word worship. Just get rid of it.
Delete it. That's a core concept.
It's a misleading translation of the core concept. The word is ibadah, comes from the root abad. And ab doesn't mean worshiper. It means a slave or a subject.
Okay.
A subject doesn't just worship a king. A subject obeys the laws of the king. Their actions are bound by the king's decrees.
So nabudu means we obey, or we follow the code.
We submit. We follow the operational code. The sources redefined ibadah as total submission and obedience to the laws. It's the utilization of all human faculties, our intellect, our labor, our resources to implement the divine system on earth.
And the only part,
Yeah.
the iyaka, you alone.
That is the Declaration of Independence.
Independence from what?
Independence from human tyranny. Independence from priesthoods who claim to speak for God. Independence from man-made legislation that serves the elite at the expense of the masses.
So it's a political declaration.
It's the ultimate political declaration. The sources argue that if you obey a law made by a human being that contradicts the universal law of nourishment, you are committing shirk.
Shirk, as in polytheism, associating partners with God.
Yes. In this political definition, polytheism isn't just bowing to a stone statue. It is acknowledging a sovereign authority other than the divine law. If a dictator says, hoard the grain and let the poor starve, and you obey, you have accepted that dictator as your Malik. You are no longer practicing Iyaka Nabudu.
Wow, so it's a fundamental rejection of all authoritarianism.
It is the ultimate anti-authoritarian stance against humans, achieved by submitting to the ultimate authority of the law. It basically says, I will not bow to any human being, any king, any priest, any corporation. I bow only to the principle of justice and universal development.
Okay. And then look at the second half. What Iyaka nastain, and to you alone we look for help. Now, normally, people think this means I'm in trouble, I'll pray for a miracle to get me out of it.
But remember, this is a system of cause and effect. This is a deen, not a mazhab. The sources say istiana, seeking help, isn't asking for supernatural intervention to break the laws of physics. It's not about praying for the law of gravity to be suspended because you dropped your keys.
So what is it?
It is seeking aid through the collective system established on these laws.
I think I need another analogy for that one.
Okay. If you are a farmer and your field is dry, asking God for help in the Dean system isn't sitting on your porch praying for rain while the sky is perfectly clear. It is understanding God's law of hydrodynamics, getting together with your community, digging an irrigation canal, and utilizing the water resources that the Rab has already provided in the river.
You align yourself with the law, and the law helps you.
You align your actions with the system, and the system supports you. The help is in this system. The state, the instrumented Dean, is the vehicle through which this help arrives. If you are poor, the system, which is God's operational arm on earth, provides you with the means to become self-sufficient. That is Iyaka Nastin in action.
It's so practical. It's so grounded in reality.
It has to be. It's a manifesto of governance. And now that we've established the contract, we obey the law and get support from the law. In verse 5, we need the program. We need a direction. Where are we going? That's verse 6. Idina Siratul Mustaqim.
Guide us to the straight path.
Right. First, let's look at the concept of guidance, or hidayat. Why do we even need it? Why can't we just figure it all out ourselves?
Because we're human, we mess up.
We mess up. But why? The sources draw a sharp comparison with animals. An animal has fitra, a fixed, hardwired instinct. A spider knows how to build a perfect web from the moment it's born. It doesn't need a manifesto or a university course. It's hardwired.
But humans aren't.
Humans are born with a clean slate. We have intellect, which is an incredible tool, but intellect is neutral. It's a powerful processor that can be used to build a hospital or to design a more efficient concentration camp. It is liable to emotional bias, to greed, to tribalism, to short-term thinking.
So because we have free will and a powerful but fallible intellect, we need external data. We need revelation. We need a map.
Correct. We need an objective external map that isn't distorted by our own desires. That map is Hidayat, and the path it shows is the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path.
Now, the sources make a very big deal about the shape of this path. It's straight. It's not circular.
This is a direct and profound critique of the concept of cyclic time. Many ancient religions and philosophies, Greek, Vedantic, and others, view time as a great wheel, a cycle, the eternal return. You are born, you suffer, you die. You are reborn to suffer again.
And the goal is to break the cycle, to escape.
Exactly. The goal is nirvana, or moksha, or, in Abrahamic terms, salvation. The Arabic word would be najat.
But the sources reject this.
They explicitly reject the concept of najat. Najat implies you are in a burning building and need to be rescued. It implies you are trying to escape from a negative state, like sin or suffering. The Quranic concept, they argue, is falah.
Falah. We hear that in the call to prayer every day. Hayya ala falah, come to success.
Come to success, to achievement, to development. The goal isn't to escape the world. It is to conquer its challenges and develop the self, the kuti. The path is linear. It moves forward. It is evolutionary. It has a beginning, and it aims for a higher destination.
So the straight path is the path of continuous linear evolution of the self and of society.
Yes. It's the path that balances our physical needs in this world with a permanent, timeless values given by revelation. It's the trajectory of humanity moving from a primitive, disorganized state to a highly developed, just, and prosperous state. It's not about going back to the good old days. It's about building a better future.
This is a very progressive, forward-looking view of history.
It is inherently progressive.
Yeah.
It views stagnation as a form of death. And that leads us directly into the final verse, verse 7. This is the evidence section of the manifesto.
Sirat aledina anamta alehim, the path of those upon whom you have bestowed favors.
So here the manifesto turns to history. It's a data-driven approach. It says, don't just take my word for it. Look at the data from human history. The surah categorizes all human societies, past and present, into three distinct groups based on their operational behavior and outcomes.
Okay, so group one, the blessed anamta alayhim, who are they? Are they just the most pious people?
No, not necessarily the people who pray the most or have the longest beards. Remember, this is about operational outcomes. The sources define the blessed as nations that achieve two concrete things in this world.
Right.
First, freedom from external slavery and tyranny, and second, supremacy and leadership over their contemporaries.
So successful civilizations, empires.
Successful and just civilizations. Their defining behavior, which leads to this success, is that they do not hoard resources.
Yeah.
They establish the system of rubaiyat universal nourishment. They feed their people. They educate their children. They have world-class infrastructure. They are blessed with the good life on earth, which is the precursor to the good life in the hereafter.
Okay, that's the goal. Then we have the two negative examples. Group two, Garil Magdubi Alihim, not the path of those who earned your wrath.
Wrath-struck. It's a very heavy term.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we have to strip away the emotion. This isn't God losing his temper and smiting people. This is the mechanical, automatic grip of the law of requital.
So what causes a nation to become wrath-struck? What are the inputs that lead to that output?
The sources list very specific socioeconomic failures. Stagnation, maskanat. A refusal to move forward and adapt. Blindly following ancestors, that classic line, we do this because our fathers did it. And most crucially, creating economic imbalance.
Class distinction, the gap between the rich and the poor.
Yes. Hoarding wealth. When a society allows a vast gap to form between the haves and the have-nots, it violates the fundamental law of rububiyat. It acts like a blockage in a major artery of the body politic. The consequence is wrath, which manifests as social decay, revolution, civil war, and ultimately the cutting of the roots of that society.
It's a historical diagnosis. If you hoard, your society will collapse.
It's inevitable. It's a law of social physics.
Yeah.
And then finally, group three, waladalim. Nor those who go astray.
The lost.
The lost are characterized by one thing, confusion. They are ruled by their emotions, by popular trends, by whims, rather than by intellect guided by revelation. They just drift.
They don't have a map.
Or they have 100 conflicting maps and they try to follow them all at once. They mix truth with falsehood until they can't tell the difference anymore. They follow the majority vote just because it's the majority, even if it's a vote to march off a cliff. Or they follow charismatic leaders who speak beautifully but have no found principles. They are politically and socially aimless.
So the prayer, or rather the declaration in this manifesto, ends with a stark choice. You want to be on the linear path of development, which is group one, and you actively seek to avoid the path of the stagnant hoarders, group two, and the path of the confused drifters, group three.
Exactly. It's a strategic choice. It asks the citizen of this proposed state to align themselves, their efforts, and their votes with the party of evolution and justice.
This analysis changes absolutely everything about how I view this chapter. I mean, it's not just a beautiful, comforting ritual. It's a systemic critique of human civilization.
It is, and it has massive implications for how we understand other core concepts in Islam. Maybe we should look at a few of those deep dive implications.
Let's do it. Let's start with prayer, with dua. If this is a system of fixed, immutable laws, the law of requital, and God doesn't change his mind based on whims, then what's the point of asking for things? Why pray? What is the function of dua in this system?
This is a brilliant insight from the sources. Based on what we learned from Iyaka Nastast, seeking help through the system, dua gets a radical redefinition. It is not a petition to change God's mind. It's not, oh God, please make 2 + 2 = 5 today because I didn't study for my math test. That will never work.
Because the laws of mathematics are immutable.
Right. So dua is the articulation of a high ideal in order to create a psychological change within the self. The phrase used in the source is tubadal-j, so that you change.
So, I change, not God, not the system.
Exactly. You articulate the goal. Guide us to the straight path. This creates a psychological revolution inside you. It focuses your intent. It crystallizes your determination. It mobilizes your own faculties and motivates you, the individual, to start acting according to the law to achieve that articulated goal.
So prayer is a self-calibration tool, a motivational tool.
It is calibration and mobilization. And when it's done collectively, when a whole society articulates this goal, we want to feed the hungry. It mobilizes the state resources to actually do it. The answer to the prayer of a hungry man is the bread provided by the system that was established by the believers. God answers the prayer through the actions of the community.
That brings us right back to the state. The sources seem to be arguing very forcefully that You can't really have Islam without an Islamic state.
They're very firm on this. They argue that deen cannot exist without tamkeen, which means power or statehood. The state is the instrument through which God helps the helpless.
Because God doesn't come down and hand out bread personally, the system does it.
Exactly. The concept is that human hands, working within a system committed to God's law of rububiyat, are the hands of God in the world. This reframes all the rituals. Salat, the formal prayer, isn't just private worship. It is the training, the assembly, the daily briefing for the members of the system. Zakat isn't just charity. It is the tax system, the economic order of development. It's the funding for the entire program of rububiyat.
It turns everything from a private, pious act into a public civic duty.
It completely removes the barrier between church and state, not by making the state a theocracy run by priests, but by making the state's fundamental purpose identical to the divine purpose, universal welfare and evolution.
And what about the closed system argument we touched on in the beginning, the idea of the finality of prophethood? How does that connect to all this?
This ties it all together beautifully. The sources argue that because the Quran functions as its own lexicon tazrif ul ayat, it defines its own terms with precision, like we just saw with deen, rab, and ibadah. And because these principles are complete, universal, and immutable, the institution of prophethood is logically ended.
Why? Why does a complete book mean no more prophets?
Because the blueprint is finished. You don't need to keep hiring a new architect every 50 years if the blueprints for the building are perfect and complete. Humanity has, in a sense, matured. We have the faculty of intellect, we have millennia of historical data, and now we have the permanent values. The age of receiving the law is over. The age of implementing it has begun.
So we don't need new revelation, we need execution.
Precisely. The Constitution has been ratified. The government must now be formed by the people to implement it.
This has been incredibly heavy, but so illuminating. Let's try to summarize this wordprint of Deen we've just walked through. It's a lot to take in.
Let's do it. We move from the preamble. First, you have universal nourishment. The operational intent of the entire system is to support evolution or rububiyat for all people everywhere.
Okay. Then the mechanics.
Second, the mechanics of evolution. We use a dual system of both stable infrastructure for earned growth, Rahim, and a safety net for emergency aid, Rahman.
And the authority behind it all.
Third, sovereignty. We acknowledge that the impartial law of requital is the only king, Malik. This is a declaration of independence from all human tyranny.
Then the social contract.
Fourth, the social contract. We, the people, submit only to these laws, ibadah, and in return, we seek help and support through the system built on those laws.
With direction.
Fifth, the trajectory. We are on a linear path of achievement, falah, not a repeating cycle of salvation. We are moving forward.
And finally, the report card.
And sixth, the historical metrics. We judge the success or failure of any society by the data. Are they free? Are they prosperous? Are they feeding everyone? Or are they stagnant, hoarding wealth and lost in confusion?
It really truly is a manifesto.
It is a document meant to be implemented, not just recited for blessings.
And it completely shifts the paradigm from religion to deen, from opium to adrenaline, from private comfort to a very public and demanding responsibility.
That is the shift. Religion sedates, deen activates.
So here's a final provocative thought for our listeners to mull over. You mentioned that wrath in this system is the mechanical result of stagnation and blindly following the past. And the straight path is defined as evolutionary and linear, always moving forward.
Right.
So if the core definition of godliness in this system is embodied in the attribute of Rab, the sustainer of evolution, what does that say about societies or even individuals that cling rigidly to the past while the world moves forward? If you are actively fighting against change and evolution, are you actually, in a systemic sense, fighting against the primary attribute of the Rab?
That is the provocative question, isn't it? Is conservatism, in the sense of resisting evolution and clinging to static traditions, actually, by this definition, contrary to the very essence of the deen?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Manifesto of Governance. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.